The man picked up a wad of chewing gum, smeared it onto the robot's face, then rubbed it a few times, and a human face took shape. Next, he implanted artificial hair on the scalp, and a flawless head was complete. Once it was attached to the neck, the transformation was finished. When Andrew saw himself in the mirror, he was completely speechless. When he was first built, he was nothing more than a chunk of metal. When Master Martin brought him home, the whole family disliked it. Luckily, Martin took him under his wing, allowing him to stay in the basement. By then, household robots were already widespread, strictly following the 3 laws of robotics. So, when the eldest daughter told Andrew to jump out of a window, he didn't hesitate. When Martin saw Andrew all battered and broken, he was furious. He called his 2 daughters over and told them, "Andrew may be a machine, but you should still treat him like family because he is one of us." But Andrew didn't blame his young master. He simply walked away and prepared himself in silence. Unlike the eldest daughter, the younger one actually liked Andrew. One day, while playing by the beach, she handed him her favorite crystal horse. But Andrew fumbled, and the delicate figurine shattered in an instant. The little girl was devastated. Andrew knew he had messed up. That night, he stayed up learning woodworking. A pile of wooden planks was already prepared. In the end, he successfully carved a wooden horse. When he gave it to the little girl, she was overjoyed, as if she had gotten back something irreplaceable. To thank Andrew for his gift, she gave him a wooden puppet in return. To her, this wooden horse was like a tiny seed planted in her heart. But to Martin, it was something extraordinary, because creativity is what gives objects meaning, and Andrew was capable of it. At first, Martin was skeptical, but that night he heard music coming from the basement. When he quietly went downstairs, he was stunned to see Andrew had repaired the phonograph. Eyes half closed, Andrew was completely lost in the music, just like a real person appreciating art. Martin was now convinced Andrew was no ordinary robot, so he took him to the robotics headquarters. He told the director about Andrew's self-awareness and his astonishing creativity. The director was just as surprised. Then he explained that Andrew's chip was probably defective. He offered to replace him with a more advanced robot and even pay to take Andrew back for research. Martin realized they would dismantle Andrew for study. Without a second thought, he took Andrew and left. On the way home, Martin told Andrew, "After finishing your daily chores, you can have free time to create." Andrew didn't fully understand, but he was grateful for the opportunity. From then on, he spent his days playing with the little girl and learning to make even more amazing things. At night, he would find Martin to ask about human knowledge, but none of this made the mistress of the house any more accepting of him. Because of that, Andrew also collected a ton of joke books. But it wasn't because his jokes were funny, it was the way he told them so seriously without realizing why they were amusing. Over time, they all accepted Andrew. In his free time, he would play the piano with the young lady. One big hand, one small hand, dancing across the keys. Time flew by in a blink. Before long, she had grown into a young woman, but she still adored Andrew as part of the family. By now, Andrew had mastered all sorts of skills. He had become a master clockmaker. Martin suggested they auction off his handcrafted clocks, but then came the question, who should get the money? Since Andrew was technically their property, all the earnings should legally belong to Martin, but the young lady insisted that every penny should go to Andrew. Martin noticed something subtle in her feelings. He warned her, "Andrew is just a robot. Don't get too attached." Still, Martin helped Andrew open a bank account. Over time, his savings grew. Then one day, the young lady came to Andrew, telling him her boyfriend had proposed, but she was torn. She had been walking down a straight road, but now she stood at a crossroads. One path was winding and uncertain, yet she couldn't help but be drawn to it. But Andrew didn't understand the heart of a confused young woman. He had no idea that the friend she spoke of was actually him. In the end, she chose not to take the winding road. Instead, she invited Andrew to dress up and welcome her at her wedding. On the big day, Andrew wore a tuxedo for the first time. The young lady walked arm in arm with her husband till she finally reached Andrew. She smiled at him, but her gaze lingered far too long, as if stirring something deep inside Andrew. That night, he watched the wedding video with Martin. They sighed at how people never stay in one place. Only Andrew would live forever. It was then that he realized Martin had aged. Time had worn him down, and he was no longer the spirited man he once was. Something stirred in Andrew's mind, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't make tears well up in his eyes. Time seemed to pass even faster for Andrew. 12 years later, the young lady had become a mother. Her child played tricks on Andrew just like she and her sister once did, but Andrew was different now. Through studying human history, wars of liberation, fights for freedom and independence, he began to crave freedom too. So he took his savings and offered to buy his freedom from Martin, but Martin refused. "If you want freedom," he said, "then leave this house and never come back." To Andrew, freedom was something he had only just begun to understand. But to Martin, it meant losing a member of his family. But even after Andrew left, he never really went far. He built a small house by the sea, where the sound of the waves rolled in freely outside, but inside it was so quiet it felt abandoned. Then one day, the silence was broken by a woman. 16 years had passed. The young lady's face was now marked by time. She told him that Martin, on his deathbed, wanted to see him one last time. Andrew returned to his grandfather's side. His grandfather's tears filled the old man's eyes as he bid Andrew farewell. Andrew hated that he couldn't feel emotions. He was grieving, yet he had no tears. This was the first loved one he had lost. After Martin passed, no one truly understood Andrew. He wanted to find others like himself, robots that could learn and create. But after traveling across countless cities and countries, he still found no one like him. Most had been scrapped or discarded. Throughout his journey, he kept writing to the young lady, telling her everything he had seen and experienced. Then, one day, he stumbled upon a female robot. She was lively and charming, and he was instantly drawn to her. He followed her into a rundown repair shop, only to discover that this robot, named Tia, was just running a collection of personality chips. Her words and actions were still pre-programmed. She wasn't like him, but there was an unexpected surprise. Tia's owner was a scientist specializing in bionics. He had already developed highly realistic synthetic skin. Andrew was eager to fund his research, and volunteered to be the first test subject. In the end, Andrew took on a new appearance, one that made him look like an ordinary man. After many years, he returned to the young lady's home, only to find her still sitting at the piano. He praised her. Her music was still beautiful, and she hadn't aged a day, but when she turned to look at him, her eyes were filled with fear. Just as Andrew was about to explain his new appearance, a familiar voice called out from behind him. Older, wearier, but unmistakably hers. The once youthful and elegant woman he had longed for was now aged. The young girl at the piano. She was Portia, her granddaughter. The young lady was stunned by Andrew's incredible transformation, but time waits for no one. Andrew had all the time in the world to search for his purpose, but for her, after waiting all these years, all she had left was her final sunset. Andrew gently held her frail, wrinkled hand, watching as she slowly drifted into eternal sleep, and only then did he notice. She had been holding the wooden horse he gave her all those years ago. Memories suddenly flooded his mechanical mind. He remembered the first time he arrived at Martin's house, how that innocent, playful young girl took him by the hand. He remembered wearing clothes for the first time, attending her wedding. After the young lady was gone, Portia became the last friend he had in this world. She looked so much like her grandmother that Andrew couldn't bear to part with her. He wanted to stay with this family to devote himself to them. Sometimes his serious jokes, just like before, could still make her burst into laughter. Even when Portia reached the same crossroads as her grandmother, she knew that beneath Andrew's human-like exterior, he was still a robot. Just like everything in the world has its true nature. A tree is a tree, water is water, and he was still a machine. But Andrew refused to accept that. He and the scientist began exploring artificial organs, modifying his body to feel sensations, and adding a few essential human components. The first thing he did after the transformation was find Portia and tell her he could now feel. He could sense the warmth and beauty of a kiss, but it was all too late. Portia was engaged to the man she had been set up with. She told him that what he needed to change wasn't his appearance, but his heart. A heart willing to take risks. Even a robot's heart sometimes needs to listen. Her words made Andrew fall into deep thought. He decided to meet Portia's fiancé. The scientist went with him. After finding the man, Andrew followed his feelings. The overwhelming impulse inside him told him he had to win her back before the wedding. Andrew told Portia. He could hear his own heartbeat. He could fool the world, but he couldn't fool the 120 beats per minute pounding inside him. That made Portia realize her own feelings too. Rather than spending her life with a man she didn't love, she would rather be with this robot for so long. After all, Andrew was no different from a human now. He had physical sensations, and they could share happiness. Even though he could burp and pass gas, he was still different from normal humans. The court rejected his request for human status. There was no such thing as an immortal human. He was still just a machine, one that couldn't escape the rules of this world. But that didn't stop him from living his life with Portia. But as time passed, the gap between Portia's appearance and his own grew wider. Andrew began to ponder the meaning of humanity. Life wasn't just about existing alone. It needed to be shared to have meaning. If all that awaited him after Portia's death was endless loneliness, he'd rather not live forever at all. So Andrew made one final transformation. He restructured his organs into organic neural systems. Just like humans, he would age, he would die. Even on their deathbeds, he and Portia held hands, bound together by fate across 1,000 lifetimes. And just as the court officially declared him human, Andrew slipped into eternal sleep. In the end, Portia asked Tia for one last favor: to unplug the power keeping Andrew alive. If you're in pain but can't cry, if you're happy but can't laugh, then you're no different from Andrew. Emotions locked away with no way to express them. We've all had those moments. Afraid of crowds, terrified of hearts so close yet so distant, beating but without warmth. But when you see someone willing to give up immortality, to trade away superhuman abilities just to have a heart that beats with warmth, you realize how precious it is to be alive, even if death is inevitable. In this vast world, maybe there are others like you. Or maybe there's no one exactly like you at all. So don't waste your time in lonely waiting. Go find your people. Change yourself. That's the secret to happiness. Movies are an art that lingers in the mind. $7 is here to recommend one worth watching. Only by experiencing the film itself can you truly live its story. See you in the next